Clara Whitmore's fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago. Not from the December cold, though snow was falling harder now, collecting in the folds of her thin dress. Not from standing bareheaded on this wooden platform in the center of Redemption Falls, while her father auctioned her off like a lame mare. The numbness came from somewhere deeper. From the place inside her chest where shame and fury had been burning for so long, they'd finally consumed all the feeling, leaving nothing but ash and the terrible, hollow certainty that this was how her story ended. 24 years old, widowed, barren, worth exactly whatever price desperate men would pay for a woman who couldn't give them sons. Her father was about to find out that price was lower than he'd hoped. Now, before we go any further, subscribe to this channel right now. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances. Comment below with your city. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. Now let's go back to that platform. Gentlemen of Redemption Falls. Vernon Whitmore's voice cut through the falling snow. Carnival Barker loud whiskey rough. He stood 3 feet from Clara, close enough that she could smell the drink on him. Not just today's bottle, but years of it, sweated out through yellowed skin. I present a woman of good breeding, fine education, skilled in all domestic arts. Clara kept her eyes on the mountains. Her mother had taught her that trick years ago, back when mother still spoke to her. Look beyond them, daughter. Look where they can't follow. But there was no following now. Mother was 3 winters dead, and Clara was alone. Clara Whitmore, Vernon continued, recently widowed, 24 years of age. She can cook a meal fit for a governor, sew stitches finer than any tailor in Santa Fe, read right cipher, kept house for her late husband Thomas Brennan 4 years before the consumption took him. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 50-60 men bundled in heavy coats. Clara recognized most of them. Had grown up in this town, bought supplies from their stores, sat in the same church pews. Now they were here to buy her. But I'll be straight with you. Vernon's voice dropped to that conspiratorial tone that made Clara's stomach turn. There's a reason I'm offering her at all. Here it came. 4 years of marriage, not a single child. He paused, letting it sink in. The midwives examined her. The doctors examined her. The conclusion is clear: she's barren. Can't give a man sons. Can't give him daughters. Can't give him anything but a clean house and hot meals. Clara's nails cut crescents into her palms. Now I know what you're thinking. Vernon pressed on. Why buy a woman who can't bear children? The crowd shifted. Some men found their boots fascinating. Others leaned forward with a different kind of interest, the kind that made Clara's throat close. Maybe you've got children already, Vernon said. Maybe you need a housekeeper more than a broodmare. Maybe you've got a mother or sister needing help. Or maybe... His voice took on an edge. You just need someone grateful enough not to complain about whatever life you offer. Clara wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to disappear into the snow that was falling heavier now, burying this moment in white. But her legs wouldn't move. I'm asking $40, Vernon announced. That's all. $40 for a lifetime of service. Papers are legal, blessed by Reverend Morrison himself. He paused. Who'll start the bidding? Silence. Not a voice. Not a hand. The snow fell. Clara could feel wetness seeping through her dress, now the good blue one Mother had sewn. The fabric clung to her shoulders, her back. Cold seeped through to skin. Still silence. Vernon's jaw tightened. Come now, gentlemen. $35. That's less than a decent milk cow. Nothing. Clara watched her father's face change, saw the bluster crack, saw something uglier underneath panic maybe, or the particular shame of a man discovering his daughter wasn't worth even his lowest price. $30, Vernon said, voice cracking now. That's less than a month's whiskey money. Surely someone here needs... Does she know how to handle children? The voice came from the back, deep, rough as creek gravel. The crowd parted. Clara's eyes found him despite herself. Tall, well over 6 feet. shoulders broad from hard labor. His coat was worn but clean mended in places with careful stitches. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but she caught a strong jaw dark with days-old beard. Eyes that stopped her breath gray as winter sky, gray as the storm clouds overhead. Yes. Vernon seized the question like a drowning man grabbing rope. Yes, she's wonderful with children. Helped raise her younger cousins very patient. I asked her. 3 words. Quiet. Final. The square went dead silent. Nobody interrupted Vernon Whitmore mid-pitch. Not in public. Not when he was already humiliated. But Vernon's mouth snapped shut. The tall man's gray eyes fixed on Clara. Ma'am, I'm asking you directly. Do you know how to care for children? Clara's throat was desert dry. She hadn't expected direct conversation. Hadn't prepared for someone to see her as a person instead of livestock. Yes, sir. Her voice came out rough. I helped raise my cousins from when they were babes. 4 of them, newborn to about 8 years. I know how to feed them, clothe them, teach them their letters and numbers. He nodded slowly. Young ones only then. I'm better with young children, yes, sir. Honesty felt dangerous, but something about his steady gaze demanded it. But I can manage older ones too. I've just got more practice with the little ones. He studied her, not evaluating her hips or face or potential for bedwarming, looking for something else, something deeper. She can't bear children. Vernon interjected, clearly worried. I want that crystal clear. 4 years produced nothing. If you're wanting sons... I have sons, the man said. Simple, factual. 5 children total. Their mother died 18 months ago. Influenza took her fast. Understanding rippled through the crowd. Several women made sympathetic sounds. Losing a wife was common enough. 5 motherless children that cut different. 5. Vernon's eyes lit up like he'd struck gold. Well then, sir, you're looking at exactly what you need, $40. And she's yours, ready to mother those children. How old are they? Clara heard her own voice, shocked herself by speaking. Both men turned. She shouldn't have. Women on auction blocks didn't ask questions. But something about this stranger made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could. The oldest is 12, the man said, addressing her directly. Name's Benjamin. Thinks he's the man of the house, since I'm gone sunup to sundown running the ranch. He paused. Something flickered in those gray eyes, grief still raw. Then there's Samuel, 9 years old, angry. Angry at the world for spinning on. Angry at me for not saving his mama. Angry at God for taking her. His voice dropped lower. Lucas is 7. Hasn't spoken since the funeral. Not more than a handful of words in 18 months. Doctor says grief stole his voice. Says it'll come back when he's ready. Clara's chest tightened. The twins are 5, he continued. Nathan and Grace. Grace is my only daughter. His voice caught, just slightly, but Clara heard it. She asks every single day when her mama's coming home. Every day I have to tell her the truth that mama's with God now that she's not coming back. But truth doesn't help a 5-year-old understand why the world's so cruel. Silence held the square. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never had children. Would never have children. But she understood grief. Understood what it meant to lose someone and have the world expect you to just keep standing. I'm sorry, she said softly. That's a terrible loss for all of you. The man gave a short nod. Then he turned back to Vernon. What's your daughter's name? Clara. Clara Whitmore. Was Brennan, but she's reclaimed her maiden name since... Clara. The way he said it made it sound less harsh, almost gentle. Then after a long moment, he reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he extracted a single coin, a silver dollar, and placed it on the platform's edge. The soft clink echoed like a gunshot. The crowd gasped. Vernon's face went purple. Now see here, I said $40. 40, that's $1. 1, that's an insult, sir, and I won't... That's all she's worth in this town. The man's voice was still quiet, but it carried an edge now. sharp as a skinning knife. In this town, she's been judged and found wanting through no fault of her own. You're selling her because you're ashamed of her. Every person in this square knows it. Vernon's mouth worked. No sound came out. The tall man continued, his eyes sweeping the crowd. If any man here truly valued her skills, her character, her humanity, you'd have bid already. He let that sink in. But you haven't. Because all you see is a woman who can't give sons. In your eyes, that makes her worthless. He paused. The snow fell harder. So I'm offering $1, which is $1 more than anyone else here values her at. And when she leaves with me, she won't be judged anymore. Not in my home. Not by my children. Not by me. The square was so quiet, Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Could hear snow hitting the platform. Could hear someone's horse shift its weight 50 feet away. She stared at this stranger, this rancher with winter sky eyes, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something that had been frozen solid since the day the midwife had delivered her verdict with pitying eyes. Vernon found his voice. That's robbery, highway robbery. I'll have the sheriff. Sheriff's standing right there. The man nodded toward a portly figure at the crowd's edge. He can confirm this is legal. You set the terms. Any man with coin can take her tonight. I've got coin. He turned back to Vernon, met his eyes with a direct challenge. Unless you'd like to call it off, take your daughter home with the dignity she deserves. It was a dare. Plain spoken. Keep your daughter and admit you were wrong to sell her. Or take the dollar and live with the shame. Vernon Whitmore had never chosen dignity over profit. His hand shot out, snatched the silver dollar. For just a moment, one brief moment, his eyes met Clara's. She saw something there. Regret, maybe, or just the reflection of his own degradation. Then he turned away. She's yours, he said, voice hoarse. Papers by morning. The tall man nodded once, then turned to Clara. I'm William Hart, he said. I have a ranch 12 miles north up near Pine Ridge. I need help with my children. They're hurting, and I can't reach them the way their mother could. He paused, choosing words carefully. I can offer you a room of your own, 3 meals a day, $1 a week for personal necessities. In exchange, I need you to care for the house and the children. The way he emphasized those words, the house and the children, made his meaning clear. Nothing else. Relief flooded through Clara so powerfully, her knees weakened. I understand, Mr. Hart. Thank you. Can you ride? Yes, sir. Not well, but I can stay in a saddle. Good enough. He glanced at the darkening sky. Collect whatever belongs to you. We're leaving now. Now. Clara blinked. But the papers will be delivered when they're ready. I'm not leaving you in this town 1 minute longer than necessary. Clara looked toward her father, hoping for what a goodbye. Some acknowledgement. But Vernon was already walking toward the saloon, his silver dollar clutched tight. I'll just... Clara's voice faltered. My things are at my father's house. I'll come with you, William said. So there's no trouble. They walked through the parting crowd, snow crunching under boots. Clara felt eyes following them, heard whispers starting like wildfire, Mrs. Henderson clutching her rosary, Old Man Sawyer shaking his head, the Martin sisters wide-eyed already storing details for gossip. The Whitmore house sat at street's end, small, shabby, peeling paint and a sagging porch. Clara had grown up here. It had never felt like home. She pushed open the door and went straight to her room. Her possessions fit in one worn carpet bag, 2 dresses, undergarments more patched than original fabric, a brush with half its bristles gone grandmother's Bible, and a tin locket. She paused over the locket, opened it. Inside was a tiny portrait of her mother, young, smiling, full of hope. Nothing like the cold stranger who'd turned away when Clara needed her most. Clara fastened it around her neck, tucked it under her collar, where it rested against her heart, warm and painful at once. When she emerged, William stood in the hallway studying faded photographs on the wall. He turned. That's everything. His eyes went to the small bag. Yes, sir. Something crossed his face. Anger, maybe, or pity. but he didn't comment on how little she owned. "After you, Miss Whitmore?" The wagon waited in front of the mercantile. Sturdy buckboard, well-maintained wheels. 2 horses stamped impatiently, their breath clouding the cold air. William helped Clara up with a brief, respectful touch to her elbow, climbed up beside her, took the reins. They left Redemption Falls without ceremony. Clara didn't look back. For the first hour, silence. The landscape rolled past snow-covered plains, scattered pines, distant mountains, white against gray sky. Wind cut through Clara's thin coat like knives. She shivered. William noticed, reached behind the seat without a word, pulled out a heavy wool blanket and offered it. "Thank you." Clara wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled of pine sap and wood smoke. And something else, lavender faint, but there. His wife's scent still clinging to the wool. Clara was entering a world built without her, trying to fit into a space carved by a dead woman's absence. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. Finally, as sunset touched the mountain peaks and painted the snow gold, William spoke. "The children." His voice was rough from disuse. "They're not easy right now." Clara listened. "Benjamin thinks he's the man of the house, gets defensive when I suggest otherwise. He's been managing the younger ones, but he's 12 years old carrying a man's weight. It's breaking him." William's jaw tightened. "Samuel's the angry one. Lashes out, tries to hurt with words because he's hurting inside. He'll test you, push you, see if you'll leave like everyone else has left." "Everyone else?" Clara asked quietly. "Catherine's family stopped visiting after the funeral. Said it was too painful. My family's back east, they've never even met the children. The town sends casseroles for a month, then forgets you exist." His voice was bitter. "We've been alone for 18 months. Samuel knows it. And Lucas, silent as stone, moves through the house like a ghost. I catch him sometimes standing in doorways just watching, like he's waiting for something that's never coming." William paused. "The twins are 5. Nathan's curious about everything, asks 1,000 questions. Grace?" His voice broke slightly. "Grace doesn't understand why her mama doesn't come when she calls. Keeps asking when she's coming home. And I keep telling her the truth, that mama's with God, that she's not coming back. But she's 5. Truth doesn't mean understanding." Clara's throat tightened. "That's heartbreaking." Catherine was... William stopped, started again. "My wife was the heart of everything. The house, the family, the whole ranch. When she died, it was like someone ripped the center out and expected us all to just keep standing." He turned to look at Clara. "I need to be clear about something, Miss Whitmore. I didn't bring you to replace Catherine. Nobody could do that. And I didn't bring you to be my wife. I'm not ready for that. May never be ready." Clara nodded. She understood. "I brought you because my children are drowning," William said, "and I can't reach them. I can mend fence, deliver calves, break horses, but I can't fix what's broken in their hearts." "I don't know if I can either," Clara admitted. "I'm not asking you to fix them." William interrupted gently. "I'm asking you to be there, to keep the house from falling apart, to make sure they eat, wash, sleep, to be steady when everything else is crumbling." He paused. "Can you do that?" Clara thought about it. Really thought. She'd spent a year feeling like a failure, measured against an impossible standard and found wanting every time. But this man, this stranger who'd bought her for $1 and promised she wouldn't be judged, was asking her to do something she might actually be capable of. Not to give birth, not to provide heirs. Just to show up, be present, care. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can do that." Relief crossed William's face. "Good." They rode on as twilight deepened. Stars appeared more than Clara had ever seen from town, painting the sky silver. Temperature dropped sharply. Despite the blanket cold, seeped into her bones. Ice formed on the wagon wheels, crackling with each revolution. "There," William said. "That's home." Clara saw lights flickering ahead, lantern light warm against darkness. As they drew closer, she made out buildings, main house barn, outbuildings clustered together. The house was two-story wide porch, wrapping the front. Even in darkness, she could see neglect peeling paint, crooked shutter weeds poking through snow. 18 months without a woman's hand showed. William stopped the wagon. Set the brake. Before Clara could move, the door burst open. Children spilled out, all five illuminated by lantern light behind them, staring with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Pa! The smallest Grace ran down the steps. Her nightgown flapped around bare feet. You were gone forever. Just since morning, baby girl? William's voice softened in a way it hadn't all day. He climbed down, swept her into his arms. Were you good for Benjamin? She was a terror. The tallest boy, Benjamin, clearly stepped forward. At 12, he already had his father's build showing in his shoulders, his eyes fixed on Clara with unmistakable suspicion. Who's that? Miss Clara Whitmore, William said, setting Grace down. He turned to help Clara from the wagon. She's staying with us, helping with the house and looking after you children while I work. We don't need looking after. Benjamin's voice was flat, hard. I've been managing fine. You burned breakfast, piped up one of the twins, gap-toothed grin. And put salt in the coffee. Shut up, Nathaniel. Boys, warning in William's voice. Mind your manners. He turned to Clara. These are my sons, Benjamin, Samuel, Lucas, and Nathan, and this is Grace. Clara climbed down, clutching her bag, faced the children. Benjamin scowled openly. Samuel, the 9-year-old, stood with arms crossed, jaw set like he was ready for battle. Lucas watched with enormous eyes but said nothing. The twins stood together, Nathan, curious, Grace half hiding. Hello? Clara said. She didn't force a smile. I'm pleased to meet you. Silence. Is she our new ma? Grace asked. Small voice. No. William was firm. Your ma is your ma. Always will be. Miss Clara is here to help. That's all. We don't need help, Benjamin repeated. But less conviction now. He looked tired, bone-deep tired from carrying too much weight too long. Well, you've got it anyway, William said. Now, Benjamin, take Miss Whitmore's bag. Show her to the spare room. Rest of you bed. It's late. The children dispersed slowly. Plenty of foot dragging. Mutinous looks. Benjamin grabbed Clara's bag with barely contained hostility. Disappeared inside. The others followed, glancing back. William waited until they were gone, then turned to Clara. In the lantern light, his face looked haggard. Older. I'm sorry, he said quietly. They're not usually this rude. They're protecting themselves, Clara said. I understand. I'm a stranger in their mother's space. Of course they're suspicious. William studied her, surprise in those gray eyes. You do understand. I know what it's like to build walls just to survive, Clara said simply. Those children have walls I can't even see yet. But Mr. Hart, I meant what I said. I'll show up. I'll be here, whether they accept me or not. For the first time, William Hart smiled. Small. Barely there. But it transformed his face from stern to almost gentle. Come on, he said. Let's get you inside before you freeze. The interior spoke of recent chaos and long-term neglect. Dishes piled in the basin. Clothes draped over chairs. Floor needing sweeping. Dust coating every surface not in daily use. But underneath, Clara saw bones of a well-loved home. Handmade curtains faded but carefully sewn. A dining table scarred with use but solidly built. Children's drawings pinned to walls. Benjamin waited at the stairs, her bag at his feet. This is your room. He pushed open a door, small but clean. Single window overlooking the front yard. A bed dresser washstand. Simple. Someone, probably Benjamin, had made up the bed with sheets that smelled of sage and sunshine. Thank you, Clara said. Benjamin's expression didn't soften. My ma's things are in the attic. Pa couldn't bear to move them, so they're just sitting there. You're not to touch them. You're not to go in their bedroom, and you're not to think you can just walk in here and take her place." Each word was a small stone thrown with precision. But Clara had been hurt by experts. A 12-year-old's anger couldn't touch her the way Redemption Falls had. "I'm not here to take anyone's place, Benjamin," she said quietly. "I'm here to help. That's all." "We'll see." He turned on his heel, left her alone. Clara sat on the bed. Her hands trembled now that she was finally alone. The enormity of what had happened was sinking in. This morning she'd woken in Redemption Falls, knowing her father planned to sell her, but not believing it would actually happen. Tonight, she was in a stranger's house 12 miles from everything she'd known, responsible for 5 grieving children who wanted nothing to do with her. She pulled the locket from beneath her collar, opened it, looked at her mother's young, hopeful face. "I'm sorry, Mama," she thought. "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you wanted." But even as she thought it, William's words echoed. She won't be judged anymore. Maybe broken was all right here. Maybe broken could still be useful. Clara changed into her nightgown, washed her face in the basin, crawled between sage-scented sheets. Through thin walls, she heard the house settling. Floorboards creaking, a child coughing, the distant sound of William's boots on stairs. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, she'd begin earning her place. Tomorrow she'd face whatever challenges these children threw at her. Tomorrow she'd prove that a woman didn't need a working womb to have value. But tonight, alone in a strange room in a house full of grief, Clara Whitmore let herself cry. For her marriage, for her parents' love, for the children her body would never create, for the woman she'd been expected to be and the woman she actually was. And somewhere in that grief, she found the smallest spark of something else. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. The possibility that here in this broken house with these broken children and this broken man, she might finally find a place where being broken was enough. Outside, wind howled through pine trees. Snow fell heavier, burying the world in white. And in the small room at the top of the stairs, Clara closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow, with all its trials and small mercies. Tomorrow, she would begin again. Dawn came too early and too cold. Clara woke to unfamiliar sounds, a rooster crowing somewhere close, cattle lowing in the distance, and the unmistakable thunder of children's feet on wooden stairs. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The auction. The dollar. William Hart's gray eyes promising she wouldn't be judged anymore. She sat up, her breath misting in the frigid air. The fire in the main room downstairs must have died during the night because cold had seeped into every corner of the house. Clara dressed quickly in her everyday calico fingers, clumsy with cold, as she braided her hair. Through the thin walls, she could hear voices raised in argument. "I told you to watch the stove, Matthew." "I did watch it. It's not my fault the pan was too hot." "Everything's always someone else's fault with you, isn't it?" "Shut up, Benjamin. You're not Pa." Clara took a breath, steadied herself, then opened her door and descended the stairs. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Benjamin stood at the stove wielding a spatula like a weapon, his face flushed with frustration. Samuel. She assumed that was Samuel, the angry 9-year-old, sat at the table with arms crossed and jaw set. Lucas hovered near the window, watching everything with those enormous silent eyes. The twins, both still in nightclothes, were attempting to set the table with more enthusiasm than skill. Forks clattered to the floor like autumn leaves. Smoke rose from a pan on the stove. The smell of burned eggs filled the air. "Good morning," Clara said, pitching her voice to carry without shouting. 5 heads swiveled toward her. The room went dead quiet. Benjamin recovered first. "Pa's already out with the cattle. Left before sunup. Said to tell you there's eggs in the coop milk and the cold cellar flour in the pantry." "Thank you." Clara moved into the kitchen, assessing damage. Burned eggs in one pan. What looked like the remains of an attempted pancake in another. Coffee boiling over on the back burner, filling the room with bitter smell. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the stove. Benjamin stepped back. Relief flooded his face despite his attempt to hide it. Suit yourself. Clara had learned to cook in her mother's kitchen under strict tutelage. She'd never enjoyed it particularly, but she knew her way around a stove. She removed the ruined pans, dumped the coffee that was more sludge than beverage, and started fresh. The children watched in silence. Their expressions ranged from Benjamin's barely concealed hostility to Grace's wide-eyed curiosity. "Nathaniel Grace," Clara said as she measured coffee grounds. "Could you pick up those forks and put them in the basin? We'll need to wash them before we use them." The twins looked at each other, then at Benjamin, clearly seeking permission. When he didn't object, they scurried to obey, treating it like a game to see who could collect the most forks. "Samuel." Clara continued cracking eggs into a bowl. "Would you mind fetching water from the pump? We'll need it for washing up." "Get it yourself," Samuel said. Didn't move from his chair. Clara paused, egg in each hand. Turned to look at him properly. This was a test. Push too hard, and she'd lose him completely. Back down and she'd never earn his respect. "All right," she said mildly, turning back to her work. "I'll get it myself in a moment. Though I have to say, your father struck me as the kind of man who raises children with better manners than that." It was a gamble invoking William's authority when he wasn't present to back her up. Samuel's face flushed. For a moment Clara thought he'd double down on the rudeness. Then he stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "Fine," he muttered, grabbing the water bucket and stalking out the back door. Small victory. Clara allowed herself a mental note of it before whisking the eggs with a fork. Beside her, Benjamin was studiously ignoring her presence, but she could feel his attention tracking her every move. "Your mother must have been a wonderful cook," Clara ventured, keeping her tone conversational. "This is a well-organized kitchen. Everything has its place." Benjamin's jaw tightened. She was the best. Her cinnamon rolls every Sunday were better than anyone's in the whole territory. And her stew... He stopped abruptly. Don't what? Don't talk about her like you knew her, like you have any right to even speak her name." Clara set down her whisk, turned to face him fully. "You're right. I didn't know her. I don't have any right to speak about her as if I did. I'm sorry." Benjamin blinked. Clearly hadn't expected an apology. "But," Clara continued gently, "I can see evidence of her everywhere in this house. In the curtains she sewed. In the way she organized this kitchen. In the fact that her children loved her so much, they're willing to fight anyone who might try to replace her." She paused. "I'm not trying to replace her, Benjamin. I'm just trying to help." Before he could respond, Samuel burst back in with the water bucket, slopping a good amount across the floor in the process. "Here," he said, slamming it down. "Your water." "Thank you," Clara said. Nothing in her tone acknowledged his rudeness. "That's very helpful." Samuel looked confused by her mild response. He'd clearly been expecting a fight. Clara poured the eggs into a heated pan slicked with butter and got to work. Within minutes, she'd produced scrambled eggs that were actually edible toasted bread that wasn't burned, and fresh coffee that smelled like coffee instead of mud. "Everyone sit," she said. "Breakfast is ready." They gathered around the table, slowly, suspicion written on every face except Grace's. The little girl climbed into her chair with the help of Nathan, her blonde curls tangled, and her nightgown askew. Clara served the food and sat down herself, suddenly aware of 5 pairs of eyes watching her every move. "Aren't you going to say grace?" Grace asked. Then giggled at her own accidental pun. "Grace say grace." "Would you like to say it, sweetheart?" Clara asked. Grace's face fell. "I don't remember all the words. Mama used to say it, but I forget." Silence descended, heavy with grief. "That's all right," Clara said gently. "We can say a simple one together. Would that be okay?" Grace nodded. Clara bowed her head. "Thank you for this food, for this family, and for this day. Amen." "Amen?" The children echoed. All except Samuel, who stared at his plate with mutinous silence. They ate. The eggs weren't perfect. Clara had been out of practice, but they were edible and hot, and that seemed to be enough. Even Samuel took 3 helpings, though he refused to make eye contact with her. After breakfast, Clara surveyed the disaster that was the main room. Dishes everywhere, clothes draped over furniture, dust thick enough to write your name in. 16 months of grieving men and children had left their mark. "All right," she said more to herself than the children. "Where do we start?" "You don't need to," Benjamin began. "I know I don't need to," Clara interrupted. "But I'm going to anyway. This house deserves better than this. Your mother deserves better than this." That stopped his protest cold. "Now," Clara continued, "I'm going to need help. Benjamin, you're in charge of collecting all the clothes that need washing. Samuel, you're going to help me move furniture so we can sweep properly. Lucas." She turned to the silent 7-year-old who'd been shadowing them all morning without saying a word. "Lucas, would you be willing to help me figure out where things go? You've lived here your whole life. I haven't. I'll need a guide." Lucas stared at her with those enormous eyes. Didn't speak. But after a moment he nodded. "Perfect. Nathaniel, Grace, you two are on a treasure hunt. I need you to find anything that doesn't belong where it is. Toys, books, anything that should be put away. Can you do that?" The twins nodded enthusiastically, already scanning the room for misplaced items. They set to work. Clara had learned long ago that the best way to manage children was to keep them busy and make them feel useful. Within an hour, the main room was starting to look less like a disaster zone and more like a home. Benjamin worked in sullen silence, but he worked. Samuel complained constantly about everything: the dust, the work, the unfairness of having to clean when he'd rather be outside, but his hands kept moving. Lucas was her shadow, appearing at her elbow whenever she needed something moved or found his help wordless but invaluable. And the twins turned cleaning into an elaborate game involving dragons and treasure that made no sense to Clara, but kept them engaged and mostly out of trouble. By noon, the main room gleamed. Windows let in actual sunlight instead of filtered murk. The air smelled of lemon oil and soap instead of stale grief. Clara stood in the center of it all, hands on her hips, surveying their work. "It looks like it used to," Grace said softly, coming to stand beside her. "When Mama was here." Clara's throat tightened. "Your Mama had good taste. We're just continuing what she started." Lunch was simple bread and cheese and apples from the cold cellar, eaten around the table with considerably less tension than breakfast had held. Even Samuel seemed marginally less hostile, though he still refused to speak directly to Clara. After lunch, Clara sent the children outside to play. They needed fresh air, and she needed a moment to breathe. The house was quiet for the first time since she'd woken. Clara walked through the rooms, slowly taking stock. There was so much work to be done. So many small things that had been neglected. Mending, that needed doing. Floors that needed scrubbing. A garden that... She stopped at the back window, looking out at what had once been a garden. Now, it was just frozen ground and dead stalks poking through snow. Catherine's garden William had mentioned. Clara made a mental note. Spring would come eventually. When it did, she'd see what could be saved. "She's dead, you know." Clara turned. Samuel stood in the doorway, his face hard. "Who's dead?" "Samuel." "My ma. She's dead, and she's not coming back, and you being here doesn't change that." Clara moved to the table, sat down, gestured to the chair across from her. Samuel didn't move. "You're right," Clara said quietly. "Your mother is gone, and nothing I do will change that. I'm not here to change that, Samuel. I'm not here to make you forget her or replace her, or pretend like she never existed." "Then why are you here?" "Because your father asked me to help. Because you and your brothers and sister need someone to make sure you eat and wash and have clean clothes. Because this house was falling apart, and someone needed to try to hold it together." "We were doing fine without you," Samuel said, but his voice cracked. "No," Clara said gently. "You weren't. You were surviving. That's different from being fine." Samuel's face twisted. "You don't know anything about us, about what it's like." "You're right. I don't know what it's like to lose a mother. But I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you. I know what it's like to be so angry you could scream, but you have to just keep going anyway because there's no other choice. She paused. And I know that being angry at me is easier than being angry at your mother for dying or at God for taking her. So if you need to be angry at me, Samuel, that's all right. I can handle it. Samuel stared at her. His 9-year-old face was working through emotions too big for his small frame. Then he turned and ran. Clara let him go. Some things couldn't be fixed with words. The afternoon passed in more cleaning, more organizing, more small battles won and lost with the children's trust. Benjamin remained warily suspicious. Samuel avoided her entirely after their confrontation, but Lucas brought her a smooth stone he'd found by the creek and placed it carefully on the kitchen windowsill, without explanation. And Grace asked if Clara could help her brush out her tangled hair. Clara sat on the porch steps with Grace between her knees, working a brush gently through blonde curls, while the winter sun slanted low. "Mama used to sing when she brushed my hair," Grace said. "Do you know any songs?" Clara's voice was nothing special, serviceable but plain. But she sang anyway, "Hush Little Baby," in a quiet voice while her hands worked through tangles. Grace hummed along, not quite on key. "That was nice," Grace said when Clara finished. "You're nice." "Thank you, sweetheart." "Are you going to stay? Or are you going to go away like everyone else?" Clara's hands stilled. "What do you mean, like everyone else?" "Grandma and Grandpa used to visit all the time. Then Mama died and they stopped coming. They said it was too sad. And the church ladies brought food for a while, but then they stopped too. Everybody stops." Clara's chest ached. "I'm not going to stop, Grace. I'm going to stay." "Promise." "I promise." "What if we're bad? Samuel's mean sometimes. Benjamin gets grumpy. What if we make you want to leave?" Clara turned Grace around gently so they were face to face. "Listen to me carefully, Grace. You could be as bad as you possibly know how to be, and I still wouldn't leave. Do you know why?" Grace shook her head. "Because I made a promise to your father that I would help take care of you, and I keep my promises." Grace studied her with those serious 5-year-old eyes. Then she threw her arms around Clara's neck and held on tight. Clara held her back, this motherless child who smelled of little girl sweat and pine trees. And something in her chest that had been frozen for so long started to thaw. William returned as the sun was setting, riding in on a horse caked with mud and exhausted from a long day. He dismounted in front of the house and stopped short, taking in the scene on the porch, Clara with Grace in her lap, both of them watching the last of the daylight paint the snow gold. "Pa!" Grace scrambled down and ran to him. "Miss Clara sang to me and brushed my hair, and she promised she's not going to leave." William's gray eyes met Clara's over his daughter's head. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just exhausted gratitude. "Is that so?" he asked Grace, but he was still looking at Clara. "I keep my promises, Mr. Hart," Clara said quietly. "I'm starting to see that." He swung Grace up onto his hip. "How was your day?" "We cleaned the whole house. It looks like when Mama was here. And Miss Clara made real breakfast and—" "Where's Benjamin?" William interrupted, scanning the yard. "Here, Pa." Benjamin emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "Just finishing the evening feed." "Good man." William set Grace down. "Everyone else?" "Samuel's in the barn loft." Benjamin said, his voice careful. "Been up there since lunch. Lucas is in the main room. Twins are playing upstairs." William's jaw tightened. He knew what it meant when Samuel hid in the barn loft. "I'll talk to him." "He had a hard day," Clara said, standing. "We had a conversation that didn't go the way he wanted." William turned to her. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where I told him it was all right to be angry at me instead of at his mother for dying. He didn't like that much." Something shifted in William's expression. "You told him that someone needed to." William studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll go talk to him. You've done enough for one day." "I'll get dinner started," Clara said. "You must be starving." She headed inside before he could argue. before she could see whatever emotion was playing across his weathered face. Dinner was quiet. Samuel came down from the loft but didn't speak. He sat at the table and ate the stew Clara had made. Not from Catherine's recipe box, she wasn't ready for that yet, but from her own mother's recipe, and kept his eyes on his plate. William ate like a man who'd been working since before dawn and hadn't stopped. He didn't say much, but Clara felt him watching the children, assessing how this first day had gone. After dinner, the children scattered to their evening routines. William lingered at the table while Clara washed dishes. "The house looks good," he said finally. "Better than it has in months." The children helped. They worked hard. "Benjamin said you were fair, that you didn't try to be something you weren't." Clara dried a plate, set it carefully in the cupboard. "I told them I wasn't here to replace their mother. That seemed important to establish early." It was. William stood bringing his coffee cup to the basin. "Clara, Miss Whitmore, I want you to know. Today. What you did today. It mattered." Clara's hands stilled in the dishwater. "I just cleaned and cooked, Mr. Hart. Nothing extraordinary." "You showed up," William said quietly. "You did what you said you'd do. In this house with these children, that's more extraordinary than you know." He left her there in the kitchen, his boots heavy on the stairs, as he went to check on the children before bed. Clara finished the dishes in the quiet house, her hands moving through soapy water, while her mind turned over the day. The small victories and the larger battles still to come. Samuel's anger, and Grace's trust, and Lucas's silent stone offering, and Benjamin's wary respect. She'd survived day one. That was something. When the kitchen was clean and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Clara climbed the stairs to her small room. She changed into her nightgown, washed her face, and crawled into bed. Through the walls, she heard the sounds of the house. William's low voice checking on children. Grace asking for one more drink of water, Nathan and Lucas whispering in their shared room. The sounds of family. Clara closed her eyes and let herself imagine just for a moment that this was her family. These were her children. This was her home. It wasn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But tomorrow she would show up again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until showing up became belonging. Until broken became whole. Until, maybe just maybe, a woman bought for $1 could become priceless. Outside, snow began to fall again, silent and soft, covering the world in white. And inside the small room at the top of the stairs, Clara Whitmore slept dreamlessly for the first time in longer than she could remember, wrapped in sage-scented sheets, and the tentative hope that she might actually survive this after all. 3 weeks passed in a blur of early mornings and exhausted nights. Clara fell into the rhythm of ranch life wake before dawn. Start the fire, make breakfast clean. Cook, mend, repeat. The children slowly, grudgingly began to accept her presence. Benjamin stopped watching her, like she might steal the silver at any moment. Samuel's barbs lost some of their edge. Lucas left small gifts on her windowsill almost daily, now roc's feathers, once a perfectly preserved bird's nest. And Grace had taken to following Clara everywhere, a small shadow in a too-big nightgown that desperately needed replacing. It was Grace who woke her that morning, climbing into her bed before sunrise, her small body radiating heat like a stove. "Mama Clara," Grace whispered. She'd started calling Clara that a week ago, testing the name carefully like it might break. "My throat hurts, and my head feels funny." Clara pressed a hand to Grace's forehead. Hot. Too hot. "All right, sweetheart," Clara said, keeping her voice calm despite the ice forming in her stomach. "Let's get you back to bed. You're staying home today." She carried Grace to the room she shared with Nathan, tucked her under blankets, and felt her forehead again. Still burning. Just a winter cold, Clara told herself. Nothing that rest and fluids wouldn't cure. By noon, she knew she was wrong. Grace's fever had spiked to something dangerous. The little girl drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling nonsense about chickens and snowmen, and whether the sky was supposed to be green. Her skin was dry, despite the heat radiating from her small body. Her lips cracked, even though Clara kept trying to get water into her. "Benjamin," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need you to ride out to the north pasture where your father's working. Tell him Grace is very sick. Tell him I need him home." Benjamin's face went white. Is it like when Ma—" "No," Clara said firmly, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "It's not like that. But she needs her father. Can you go?" Benjamin was out the door before she finished speaking, running for the barn with the desperate speed of a child trying to outrun his worst nightmare. Samuel. Clara turned to find him standing in the doorway, his face carefully blank. "I need you to ride to town. Get Doc Morrison. Fast as you can. Can you do that?" For once, Samuel didn't argue. Didn't make a smart remark or challenge her authority. He just nodded and ran. That left Clara alone with Grace Lucas and Nathan. The twins stood together near the bed, holding hands, their usual energy subdued into worried stillness. "Lucas," Clara said, "pump fresh water, as much as you can carry. Nathan, go to the pantry and bring me any dried herbs you can find. Mint chamomile, anything that looks like it's for tea." The boys scattered to their tasks, grateful to have something to do besides watch their sister burn. Clara sat on the edge of Grace's bed and pressed another cool cloth to the child's forehead. Grace's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Mama." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Clara's throat closed. "It's Miss Clara, sweetheart. Your mama's still with God, remember." "Want Mama." Tears leaked from the corners of Grace's eyes. "Want Mama to make it stop hurting." "I know, baby. I know you do." Clara's own tears fell unchecked now. "But your mama can't come back. So you've got me instead. And I'm going to do everything I can to make you better, all right. But I need you to fight. I need you to be brave and strong and fight." Grace's eyes closed again. Lucas returned with water, his thin arms straining under the bucket's weight. Nathan brought an armful of dried herbs, some Clara recognized, and some she didn't. She made a tea from chamomile and mint, sweetening it with honey, and tried to coax Grace into drinking. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured, supporting Grace's head while holding the cup to those cracked lips. "Just a few sips. That's all I need. Just a few sips." Grace managed 2 swallows before turning her head away with a whimper. Time became meaningless. There was only Grace's burning skin and Clara's cool cloths. Only the ragged breathing and whispered prayers. Only the endless cycle of water and cloth and prayer. And please, 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 don't take this child. William burst through the door like a winter storm, Benjamin close behind him. His face was stark white beneath the tan. "How bad?" he demanded, already crossing to the bed. "Bad," Clara said. "The fever's high and getting higher. She's barely conscious. I can't get enough water into her." William knelt beside the bed, his large hand gentle on his daughter's burning forehead. "Grace, baby girl, can you hear me?" Grace's eyes opened. "Pa, it hurts." "I know, sweetheart. I know. Doc Morrison's coming. He's going to make you better." "Where's Mama? I want Mama." William's face crumpled. For just a moment, Clara saw the grief he kept locked away. Then he pulled himself together with visible effort. "Mama can't come, baby. But you've got me. And you've got Miss Clara. We're going to take care of you." Matthew arrived 20 minutes later, with Doc Morrison, a grizzled man in his 60s who'd seen every kind of illness the territory had to offer. He examined Grace with efficient movements, while the family clustered in the hallway, too afraid to leave, but unable to watch. When Doc Morrison emerged, his face was grave. "It's scarlet fever," he said without preamble. "The rash will confirm it in the next day or so, but all the signs are there." William's hand gripped the doorframe. Is there something? "I can leave you willow bark extract for the fever. But mainly it's going to take constant care. Cool cloths, fluids, rest. Keep that fever down any way you can. If it gets much higher—" He stopped. Didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "I'll stay with her," Clara heard herself say. "I'll keep the fever down." Doc Morrison turned to her. "This isn't your child, miss. You understand that scarlet fever is serious business. You'd be putting yourself at risk, and for what?" "A child you've known 3 weeks. She's mine," Clara said. The words came out fierce, certain. "She might not be mine by blood, but she's mine by choice. And I choose her. I choose all of them. Now tell me what I need to do." Something shifted in the doctor's weathered face. He pulled a small vial from his bag. 2 drops, dissolved in water every 4 hours. Arad. Keep her cool. Get fluids in her any way you can. And keep everyone else away unless they've already had scarlet fever. Last thing this family needs is all 5 children sick. He left instructions and medicine and departed with promises to return the next day. William stood in the hallway after the doctor left, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. "I can't." His voice broke. "I can't lose her too. It'll kill me, Clara. I can't survive losing another one." Clara stepped close, put her hand on his arm, felt the tremor running through him. "You won't lose her," she said. "I won't let you lose her." "You can't promise that." "You're right. I can't know for certain what's going to happen. But I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to save her. I won't sleep. I won't rest. I won't stop fighting for her. That much I can promise." William looked at her with those winter sky eyes, and in them she saw fear and hope, and something else she couldn't quite name. Then he nodded once and turned to his sons. "Benjamin, you're in charge of your brothers. Samuel, Matthew, Nathan, you mind your brother. Miss Clara needs to focus on Grace. Can you boys handle things for a few days?" "Yes, sir," they chorused, even Samuel's voice lacking its usual defiance. "Good." William looked back at Clara. "I'll be close. If you need anything—" "I'll call," Clara finished. "Now go. Let me work." The next 18 hours blurred into a nightmare of fever and fear. Clara kept her vigil by Grace's bedside, changing cool cloths every few minutes, dripping water and willow bark extract onto those cracked lips, monitoring every breath and whimper. The boys brought her food she didn't eat. William appeared in the doorway every hour, his face haggard, needing to see that his daughter still breathed. Lucas brought fresh water without being asked. Benjamin made sure his brothers ate, even though no one was hungry. Samuel stopped being angry at the world long enough to sit quietly in the hallway outside Grace's room, as if his presence alone could keep death away. Somewhere around 3 a.m, Grace's fever spiked higher. The little girl began thrashing her small body, convulsing with heat, her skin so hot it hurt to touch. Clara's careful calm shattered. "No," she whispered frantically, stripping away blankets, pressing cool cloths everywhere she could reach. "No, no, no. Come on, sweetheart. Come back to me. Come back." She worked with desperate efficiency, changing water to make it colder, adding more willow bark extract, physically holding Grace still so she wouldn't hurt herself in her delirium. Tears streamed down Clara's face unchecked as she worked her hands, moving on instinct, while her mind screamed prayers into the darkness. "You can't have her," Clara said fiercely to the empty room, to whatever force decided who lived and who died. "I don't care what you took from me. I don't care that my body couldn't give life. I'm giving it now. I'm choosing this child, this life, this moment. And you can't have her." Time lost meaning. There was only Grace's burning skin and Clara's cool cloths, only the ragged breathing and the whispered prayers, only the endless battle between fever and will. Then, just as the first gray light of dawn began seeping through the window, something shifted. Grace's thrashing slowed. Her breathing, while still labored, became more regular. Clara pressed her palm to the child's forehead and felt not coolness, not yet, but less heat. The fever was breaking. "That's it," Clara whispered, exhausted tears falling faster now. "That's my girl. Come back to us. Come on back." As the sun rose over the frozen landscape, painting the snow pink and gold, Grace's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy and unfocused, but they were open. Her cracked lips moved. "Thirsty." It was the most beautiful word Clara had ever heard. Yes, sweetheart. Yes, I'll get you water. Clara's hands shook as she poured fresh water, adding a drop of honey for sweetness. She supported Grace's head with infinite gentleness and helped her drink. The little girl managed 3 sips before turning her head away with a soft sound. But it was enough. It was progress. It was life choosing to stay instead of slip away. More later, Clara promised, setting the cup aside. Rest now. You're going to be all right. Grace's eyes struggled to focus. Mama. Clara's heart clenched. No, sweetheart. It's Miss Clara. Your mama's still with God, remember? Grace's face crumpled. Fresh tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Want Mama? I know you do. Clara smoothed damp hair back from Grace's forehead, her own tears falling freely. But your mama can't come back, baby, so you've got me instead. I know I'm not her. I know I'm not what you want. But I'm here, and I love you, and I'm so very glad you decided to stay with us. The words slipped out before Clara could stop them. She loved this child, loved all of them. When had that happened? When had these 5 grieving children stopped being William's problem and become her purpose? Grace's small hand found Clara's and held on with surprising strength. Stay. Always. Clara promised. I'll stay always. She must have dozed then, exhaustion finally claiming her because the next thing she knew, someone was touching her shoulder gently and she jerked awake with a gasp. William stood beside her, his face showing every hour of a sleepless night. Doc Morrison's here. Came at first light like he promised. Clara stood on shaky legs, her body protesting the hours spent bent over Grace's bed. The fever broke about an hour ago. She woke up, asked for water, managed a few sips. Something that might have been a sob caught in William's throat, but he swallowed it back. You stayed all night. I told you I would. Benjamin said you barely ate, that you've been up here for almost 36 hours straight. Your daughter needed me, Clara said simply. That mattered more than sleep or food. William looked at her for a long moment, something intense in those gray eyes. Then Doc Morrison was bustling in, efficient and professional, and the moment passed. The doctor examined Grace with careful movements, his craggy face betraying nothing until he'd completed his assessment. Finally he straightened. She'll live, he pronounced. Fever's broken, which is the biggest hurdle. She'll need rest for the next week or so, light foods, plenty of fluids. Keep her in bed even after she starts feeling better. But barring complications, she'll make a full recovery. The air went out of William's lungs in a rush. He gripped the bedpost for support. Thank God. Thank Miss Whitmore here, Doc Morrison said, packing up his instruments. Most folks wouldn't have known what to do, or wouldn't have had the stamina to do it all night. She saved your daughter's life, Mr. Hart. No question about it. After the doctor left, William stood in Grace's room, watching his daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in 2 days. Clara gathered her things, preparing to finally rest. Clara. She turned. I don't know how to thank you, William said. His voice was thick with emotion he was trying hard to control. There aren't words big enough for what you did. I didn't do anything special, Clara protested. I just stayed, that's all. That's everything. William crossed to her, stood close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the fear that still hadn't fully left his eyes. You could have kept your distance, protected yourself from getting sick too, but you didn't. You stayed with her all night, fought for her like she was your own. She is mine, Clara said. The truth of it settled into her bones as she spoke. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. I chose her, William. I chose all of them. And when you choose someone, you fight for them. You don't leave them to face the darkness alone. William's gray eyes held hers. Something shifted in them that Clara couldn't quite name. You should rest. You've earned sleep in a real bed. Just a few hours, Clara conceded, suddenly aware of how bone-tired she was. Wake me if she needs anything. I will. Clara stumbled to her room and fell onto the bed, still fully dressed. She was asleep before her head properly hit the pillow, dreaming of fever and darkness, and a little girl's hand holding hers with desperate strength. She woke to afternoon sun and the smell of cooking food. Disoriented, Clara made her way downstairs to find the kitchen full of activity. Benjamin stood at the stove, attempting something that might have been soup. Nathan was setting the table with exaggerated care. Lucas was sweeping the floor with methodical precision. And Samuel was peeling potatoes at the table, his movements angry but efficient. They all looked up when she appeared. "You saved Grace," Nathan declared, running to throw his arms around her waist. "Doc Morrison said you saved her life." "We all helped," Clara said, steadying herself against his enthusiasm. "You boys kept the house running while I was upstairs. That mattered too." "But you stayed with her all night," Benjamin said, not turning from his soup. "You didn't sleep. You didn't eat. You just stayed." There was something different in his voice now. The hostility had burned away, leaving something raw and honest underneath. Respect, maybe, or the beginnings of trust. "Of course I stayed," Clara said. "She needed someone." "Ma would have stayed too," Benjamin said quietly. "Ma would have done exactly what you did." It was the highest compliment he could have given. They both knew it. "Thank you, Benjamin. That means more than you know." Even Samuel looked up from his potatoes, then his angry mask slipping just enough to show the confused, hurting boy underneath. "You really meant it," he said, his voice uncertain. "When you said you'd fight for her, you really meant it." "Yes," Clara said simply. "I meant it. And I mean it about all of you. You're my children now, whether you like it or not. I'll fight for every single one of you." Samuel's hands stilled on the potato he'd been peeling. For a long moment, he just stared at her, working through something complex in his 9-year-old mind. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. "Thank you." It was the first kind thing he'd said to her in 3 weeks. Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. Exhaustion had apparently left her defenses weak. "You're welcome, Samuel. Now who's hungry? Because I smell something burning." Benjamin yelped and spun back to his soup, which had indeed begun to scorch on the bottom. The moment of emotional intensity broke into organized chaos as everyone scrambled to save lunch. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed. They all felt it. Over the next week, as Grace slowly recovered her strength, the household found a new rhythm. Benjamin stopped watching Clara with suspicion and started actually asking her questions about cooking, about his mother's recipes, about whether she thought a certain shirt needed mending. Nathan appointed himself her shadow, following her everywhere and narrating her activities like she was the most fascinating person alive. Lucas's gifts increased: more flowers, more rocks, and once a perfectly symmetrical pine cone that he placed on her pillow with the reverence of someone offering treasure. And Samuel slowly, grudgingly let his walls come down. It started with small things: passing her the salt without being asked, offering to carry water from the pump, not scowling quite so fiercely when she asked him to do chores. By the end of the week, he'd actually smiled at something she said. A quick flash of expression he tried to hide, but didn't quite manage. On the 8th day after Grace's fever broke, the little girl was finally well enough to come downstairs for dinner. She was thinner, paler still, weak enough that William had to carry her. But her eyes were bright, and her smile genuine. They gathered around the table, all 7 of them, for the first meal they'd shared since Grace had gotten sick. Clara had made chicken and dumplings from Catherine's recipe box the first time she'd dared to use one of the dead woman's recipes, and fresh bread and apple pie from the cold cellar stores. As they ate, conversation flowed naturally. The boys talking about their chores. Grace chattering about all the things she'd missed while sick. William quietly listening to his children with an expression of profound relief. Clara watched them, all these people who'd become hers through circumstance and choice, and felt something loosen in her chest. This was what family felt like. Not blood, not biology. Just people who showed up for each other, who fought for each other, who chose to stay even when staying was hard. "Miss Clara," Grace's small voice cut through the conversation. When I was really sick and I woke up for a little bit, you said you loved me. Did you mean it? The table went quiet. All eyes turned to Clara. She could feel William's gaze particularly, though she didn't dare look at him. Yes. Clara said, her voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to swamp her. I meant it. I love you, Grace. I love all of you. Even me. Samuel asked, his voice small. Even though I was mean to you. Even you, Clara confirmed. Especially you, Samuel. Because I understand why you were angry, and I'm not going anywhere, no matter how much you push. Nathan beamed. I love you too, Miss Clara. Lucas, silent as always, simply reached across the table and squeezed her hand once before returning to his dinner. But the message was clear. Benjamin cleared his throat, his face flushing slightly. We wanted to tell you something. All of us. We talked about it while you were taking care of Grace. Oh. Clara's heart started beating faster. Yeah. Benjamin glanced at his siblings, gathering courage. We know you're not our ma. You're not trying to be our ma, and we appreciate that. But you're here, and you care, and you fight for us. He paused. So we thought we wanted to know if, can we call you Mama? Grace blurted out before Benjamin could finish his carefully prepared speech. Not instead of our first Mama, but like a second Mama. The Mama who's here now. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The question hung in the air like something holy. You don't have to, Benjamin added quickly, misreading her silence. We know it's a big thing to ask. We just thought, yes. Clara managed, her voice breaking. Yes, you can call me Mama. I'd be honored. The smile that broke across Grace's face was brighter than the winter sun. Really? Really? Then can you tuck me in tonight like a real mama would? Of course, baby girl. Of course I will. Dinner continued with lighter hearts and fuller laughter. After the meal was done and the dishes washed after the children had scattered to their evening routines, Clara found herself standing at the back window, watching the last light fade from the winter sky. William joined her there, 2 tin cups in his hands. He offered one to her, Catherine's cup with its scratched flower filled with coffee that was actually drinkable this time. Thank you, Clara said, accepting it. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching stars emerge. Finally, William spoke. They mean it, you know, about calling you Mama. It's not just gratitude or relief that Grace is alive. They've chosen you, all of them, even Samuel. I know, Clara said softly. I can feel it. And Clara. William paused, choosing words carefully. I need you to know that I take it seriously too. What you've become to this family. What you've given us. You're not just hired help anymore. You're not just the woman who cares for my children. You're part of this family. Permanently. He turned to face her fully. Whether I ever marry again or not, whether you stay as the children's mother, or eventually decide to build a life elsewhere, you'll always have a home here. You'll always have us. Do you understand? I'm not going anywhere, Clara whispered. This is my home. You're my family. I don't need anything more than this. Relief flooded William's face. Good. That's good. I just needed you to know that you're secure here. That I'm not going to suddenly decide I don't need you anymore. You're ours, Clara. For as long as you want to be. Forever then, Clara said. I want to be yours forever. They finished their coffee, as darkness settled fully over the frozen landscape. And when they finally went inside, when Clara climbed the stairs to tuck 5 children into bed for the first time, as Mama, her heart was fuller than it had ever been. She saved Grace's room for last. The little girl was already drowsy, but fighting sleep. Mama Clara, Grace said as Clara pulled the covers up. Will you tell me a story? What kind of story? About you, when you were little. I want to know everything about you. So Clara settled on the edge of the bed and began to tell stories about her own childhood. About her grandmother, who taught her to braid hair. About the time she'd tried to bake a cake and used salt instead of sugar. She talked until Grace's eyes drifted closed, until the little girl's breathing evened out into the rhythm of healthy sleep. "Good night, baby girl," Clara whispered, pressing a kiss to Grace's forehead. "Sweet dreams." "Love you, Mama," Grace mumbled, already more asleep than awake. "Love you too, sweetheart, so very much." As Clara closed the door softly behind her, she found all 4 boys waiting in the hallway, lined up like they'd been rehearsing. "Good night, Mama," they chorused, their voices ranging from Benjamin's newly deepening tone to Nathan's child treble. "Good night, my boys," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sleep well." She made her way to her own room, finally exhausted, but content in ways she'd never experienced. As she changed into her nightgown and settled into bed, she pulled out her mother's locket one last time. "I found it, Mama," she whispered to the image. "I found where I belong." She closed the locket and set it beside Catherine's cup on the bedside table. 2 women's legacies side by side. Both honored. Both cherished. Outside, the winter wind sang through frozen trees. Inside, a house full of healing hearts settled into peaceful sleep. And in the small room at the top of the stairs, Clara no longer. Just Clara Whitmore, but Mama, now closed her eyes and dreamed of tomorrow. Winter deepened into the kind of cold that made bones ache and breath freeze in the air. Clara had been with the Hart family for 8 weeks now, and the transformation was complete. She no longer felt like an outsider, no longer questioned her right to discipline the children or rearrange the kitchen or make decisions about the household. This was her home. These were her children. She'd earned every inch of belonging. But belonging, she was about to learn, could be threatened from the outside. The supplies were running low. Flour and sugar had hit dangerously low levels, and Doc Morrison had sent word that he had a tonic for Grace, something to build her strength after the scarlet fever. William had planned to make the trip to Redemption Falls himself, but a blizzard 2 days prior had damaged fence line in the north pasture. Cattle were at risk of wandering into ravines if the repairs weren't made immediately. "I'll go," Clara said at breakfast, the decision already made. "You fix the fence. I'll take the wagon to town. Benjamin and Samuel can come with me for extra hands." William's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Are you sure the folks in Redemption Falls, they weren't exactly kind when you left?" "Then they can practice being kind now," Clara said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm not the woman they sold 8 weeks ago, William. I'm different now. I have a home. I have children. I have a place where I belong. They can't take that from me." Something flickered in William's eyes. Pride, maybe, or approval. "Take all 3 boys, then, just in case there's trouble." So after breakfast, Clara bundled up in her warmest coat, one of Catherine's that William had quietly offered her last week, altered to fit, and climbed onto the wagon bench. Benjamin sat beside her, reins ready. Samuel and Lucas sat in the back, the younger boy silent as always, but present in his steady way. The road to Redemption Falls was frozen hard, the wagon wheels crunching over packed snow. Clara hadn't been back since that terrible day on the auction block, and as the town came into view, small and mean against the white landscape, her resolve wavered. "Mama." Benjamin touched her arm gently. He'd started calling her that 2 weeks ago, testing it carefully at first, then with growing confidence. "You all right?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just remembering." "Want me to do the talking? I can handle the trading at the mercantile." Clara squeezed his hand. "That's kind of you, but I need to do this myself. I need to show them, and myself, that I'm not afraid anymore." They pulled up in front of Henderson's General Store. The same building where she'd stood 8 weeks ago, sold for $1. Clara climbed down with as much dignity as she could muster, smoothing her dress and straightening her bonnet. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Mrs. Henderson looked up from her counter, her eyes widening in recognition. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise. Mrs. She faltered clearly, unsure how to address the woman who'd been sold like livestock. "Mrs. Hart." Benjamin supplied his young voice, carrying unexpected authority. "This is our mother now. We need flour, sugar, salt, and whatever else is on this list." He handed over a paper covered in Clara's careful handwriting. Mrs. Henderson took the list with trembling fingers, her eyes darting between Clara and the boys. Of course, right away. I'll get these things together for you. She scurried into the back room, leaving them alone in the store. Clara could feel eyes on her from the street. Curious townspeople, peering through windows, no doubt already spreading word that the barren woman had returned. "Let them stare," Samuel said fiercely, moving closer to Clara's side. "They're just jealous because you're ours now, and they don't have anyone half as good." Clara's heart squeezed at the fierce loyalty in his voice. "Thank you, my love. But remember, we don't need their approval. We have each other." Mrs. Henderson returned with their supplies, packing them with nervous efficiency. As she tallied the cost, the bell chimed again. Clara's stomach dropped. Agnes Peaton swept into the store like a crow in widow's weeds, all rustling black silk and righteous indignation. She'd been in mourning since her son Thomas died, Clara's late husband, and apparently planned to wear her grief like armor indefinitely. "Margaret," she addressed Mrs. Henderson without looking at Clara. "I need black thread for—" She stopped mid-sentence as her eyes landed on Clara. "You." The word was packed with enough venom to kill a snake. Clara kept her expression neutral, her hands folded calmly. "Mrs. Peaton, I hope you're well." "Well?" The older woman's face flushed an alarming shade of purple. "Well, you have the audacity to ask about my well-being when you're standing there dressed like you have some claim to respectability. When everyone knows what you are, that barren creature who killed my son with her deficiency." "Your son died of consumption," Clara said quietly, feeling all three boys tense beside her. "I'm sorry for your loss, truly. But his death wasn't my fault any more than my inability to conceive was." Inability. Mrs. Peaton's voice rose to a screech. "You're cursed. That's what you are. Cursed and useless. And don't you dare stand there in decent clothes pretending to be something you're not. Don't talk to our mama that way." Samuel stepped forward, his 9-year-old frame vibrating with rage. "She's not cursed. She's the best mama in the whole territory, and she takes better care of us than you probably ever took care of anybody." "How dare you speak to me that way, you impudent child?" Mrs. Peaton advanced on Samuel like an avenging angel. "Someone should teach you proper respect for your elders." She reached out as if to grab Samuel's ear, but Benjamin was suddenly there, inserting himself between the angry woman and his younger brother. At 12, he was nearly as tall as Mrs. Peaton, and he used every inch of that height. "Touch my brother," he said, his voice low and dangerous in a way that reminded Clara startlingly of William. "And you'll regret it. And don't insult our mother. She's worth 10 of anyone in this town, including you." "Why, I never," Mrs. Peaton sputtered. "Margaret, are you hearing this? These wild children need discipline, and as for their so-called mother—" "She's our real mother," Lucas said. Everyone turned to stare. Lucas almost never spoke, but now his voice, small and clear, cut through the chaos. "She stayed up all night when Grace was sick." He continued his words, careful and deliberate. "Saved her life. What have you ever done that was that brave?" Mrs. Peaton's mouth worked soundlessly. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the angry woman and her children. "That's enough, boys. I appreciate you defending me, but I can fight my own battles." She turned to face Mrs. Peaton, fully drawing herself up to her full height. "You're right about one thing. William Hart bought me for $1 in a public square. Do you know why he only paid $1? Mrs. Peaton's mouth snapped shut. "Because no one else bid." Clara continued, her voice steady and clear. "Because every person in this town had already decided I was worthless based on something I couldn't control. But William Hart, he saw something different. He saw someone who could love his children, who could keep his home, who could show up every single day and do the work that matters." She took a step closer. Mrs. Peaton actually backed up slightly. "And I have," Clara said. "Every day for 8 weeks I've proven that my worth has nothing to do with my womb and everything to do with my heart. So you can call me cursed. You can call me barren. You can call me whatever you want. But those boys standing behind me, they call me Mama. And their sister who's home resting because I fought through a night of fever to save her life, she calls me Mama too." Clara's voice dropped lower, more intense. "So I'll ask you, Mrs. Peaton, What do people call you? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a bitter woman wearing her grief like a weapon, using it as an excuse to tear down anyone who's found a way to be happy, despite their losses. The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Henderson stood frozen behind her counter. The boys stared at Clara with expressions of awe and pride. And Mrs. Peaton looked like she'd been slapped. "How dare you?" she finally whispered. "How dare you speak to me that way?" "I dare because I'm not afraid of you anymore," Clara said simply. "I'm not afraid of this town anymore. You already did your worst to me, and I survived. I more than survived. I found a family who loves me. What more can you possibly take from me?" Mrs. Peaton turned on her heel and stormed from the store, the bell chiming violently with her exit. In the aftermath, Clara's hands started to shake, the adrenaline of confrontation finally catching up with her. "Mama, that was amazing," Samuel breathed. "You were like a hero in a story. You made her run away." She couldn't even think of anything to say back, Benjamin added with deep satisfaction. Lucas just looked at her with new respect in his enormous eyes. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat nervously. "Your total comes to $3.47, Mrs. Hart. And I want you to know what you said was right. We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry for that." Clara counted out the money with still trembling hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means more than you know." They loaded their supplies into the wagon and headed for Doc Morrison's office. The doctor was waiting for them, a bottle of dark liquid in his hands. "Tonic for young Grace," he said, handing it to Clara. "1 spoonful with breakfast every day for the next month should help rebuild her strength." "Thank you, doctor. How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Consider it payment for the excellent nursing you provided. Not many folks could have brought that child through what you did." Clara tucked the bottle carefully into her bag. "That's very kind of you." "You've got a gift, Mrs. Hart. Don't let anyone tell you different." They were loading the last of the supplies when a voice called out, "Clara! Clara, wait!" She turned to see a young man running toward them, his 16-year-old frame all awkward angles and earnest desperation. Her brother Thomas. She hadn't seen him since the day of her sale. "Thomas." She said, her voice carefully neutral. He skidded to a halt beside the wagon, breathing hard. "I heard you were in town. I've been hoping I wanted to see you. To apologize." "For what?" "For not stopping Pa. For not standing up for you when he sold you like—" His voice cracked. "I should have done something. I should have protected you." Clara climbed down from the wagon, leaving the boys watching with intense curiosity. She approached her little brother, seeing the guilt eating him alive. "Thomas, you were 15 years old. What could you have done?" "Something. Anything. I could have told Pa I wouldn't let him do it. I could have made a scene, brought attention to how wrong it was." He swallowed hard. "You're my sister Clara. I loved you, I still love you, and I let them sell you." "You didn't let them do anything," Clara said gently. "Pa made his choice, and that was that. You couldn't have stopped him any more than I could have." "Are you happy?" Thomas asked suddenly, looking past her to the boys in the wagon. "With the Harts? Are they treating you well?" "I'm happier than I've ever been," Clara said honestly. "Those boys have become my sons. Their sister is my daughter. Their father gave me something I never thought I'd have, a home where I'm valued. So yes, Thomas, I'm very well treated." Relief flooded her brother's face. "I'm glad. I'm so glad. I was so afraid that you'd ended up with someone cruel. William Hart is a good man, the best man I've ever known." Thomas reached out hesitantly, and when Clara didn't pull away, he pulled her into a fierce hug. "I miss you. The house is so quiet without you. Ma doesn't talk anymore, just sits and stares. And Pa drinks more than ever." "I'm sorry," Clara said, meaning it. "But I can't come back, Thomas. That's not my home anymore." "I know. I just can. I visit you, at the ranch. I want to make sure you're all right, and I want to meet your new family properly." Clara pulled back, considering. "Let me talk to William first. But yes, I'd like that. I'd like for you to see that I'm truly happy." They parted with promises to arrange a visit. Clara climbed back onto the wagon feeling lighter somehow. She'd faced her demons today. Mrs. Peaton's cruelty, the town's judgment, her own family's complicated feelings, and she'd survived. More than survived. "Mama," Benjamin said, as they left Redemption Falls behind. "Was that your brother?" "Yes, that was Thomas." "Is he nice? Can we trust him?" The fierce protectiveness in Benjamin's voice made Clara smile. "He's nice, yes. And he's family. Both my old family and potentially part of our new family if he'd like to be." "Our family is getting bigger," Samuel observed. "First we got you. Now maybe we'll get an uncle too." They rode home in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun slanting low across the snow. When they finally pulled up to the ranch, William was waiting on the porch, clearly anxious about how the trip had gone. One look at Clara's face, and his shoulders relaxed. "No trouble?" he asked as she climbed down. "Some trouble," Clara admitted. "But nothing we couldn't handle." "Boys help unload these supplies," William said. "Your mother and I need to talk." The children scattered with the efficiency of well-trained soldiers, and Clara followed William around to the back of the house where they could have privacy. She told him everything: Mrs. Peaton's venom, the boys' fierce defense, her own confrontation with the bitter woman, and finally, the unexpected reunion with Thomas. William listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I should have gone with you," he said finally. "I needed to do this myself," Clara countered. "I needed to prove to them and to myself that I'm not the broken woman they sold 8 weeks ago." "You were never broken," William said, turning to look at her with those winter sky eyes. "But I understand needing to prove it to yourself." He paused. "Your brother, do you want him to visit?" "If it's all right with you. He's the only family I have left who doesn't think I'm cursed." "Of course it's all right. This is your home, Clara. You can invite whoever you want." William hesitated, then added, "The boys defended you well, like little warriors." "Like your sons," Clara agreed with a smile. "They were ready to take on the whole town for my honor." "They love you." "I love them too. More than I ever thought possible." Something shifted in William's expression at that. He took a step closer, close enough that Clara could feel the warmth radiating from his work-heated body. "Clara, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right words for weeks now, but there never seems to be a right time and—" "Mama, Papa!" Grace's voice rang out from the house. "Come, quick! Lucas is talking. He's really talking. Not just a few words, he's telling Nathan a whole story about a bird he saw." They rushed inside to find all 5 children gathered in the main room, staring at Lucas with expressions of shock and delight. The quiet boy stood in the center of them, his face flushed, but his eyes bright. "Tell them what you told me," Nathan urged, "about the hawk." Lucas looked at William, then at Clara. Then, in his soft, careful voice, he spoke. Not just a word or two, but full sentences. "I was out by the barn this morning and I saw a hawk catch a mouse. It was so fast, just dropped out of the sky like lightning, and the mouse didn't even see it coming. And I thought about how Mama Catherine used to say that God watches over even the smallest creatures, but sometimes bad things happen anyway, and that's just the way the world works. But then I thought about how Mama Clara stayed up all night with Grace when she was sick, and maybe that's how God watches over us. Not by stopping bad things, but by sending people who'll fight for us when bad things happen." The room was silent. Then Grace started crying happy tears and threw herself at Lucas, hugging him with all her 5-year-old strength. "You're talking," she sobbed. "You're really talking." "Yeah," Lucas said, hugging her back. "I guess I am. Just after Mama Clara saved Grace, I realized I had things I wanted to say, important things, and keeping quiet didn't make sense anymore." William's eyes were suspiciously bright. He knelt down, pulling Lucas into a fierce embrace. "I'm so glad, son. So very glad." Clara stood watching this family, her family, and felt her heart might burst from the fullness of it. 2 months ago, she'd been standing on an auction block, believing her life was over. Now, she was surrounded by children who called her Mama, who defended her honor, who loved her fiercely despite her supposed deficiency. That evening, after the children were fed and bathed and tucked into bed after the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Clara found herself once again on the back porch with William. They'd fallen into this habit, sharing the end of the day together over coffee. But tonight felt different, charged with something Clara couldn't quite name. "You were going to tell me something," she said quietly, before Grace interrupted, "about finding the right words." William set down his coffee cup, turned to face her fully. "Yes, I was. Clara, these past 8 weeks watching you with the children, watching you transform this house, watching you become part of this family, it's changed something in me." He paused, choosing words carefully. "When Catherine died, I thought I'd never feel anything again but grief. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, just getting through one day at a time until the children were grown." Clara's heart started beating faster. "But you've taught me something," William continued. "You've taught me that life doesn't end after loss, that there's room in a heart for more than one kind of love, that healing doesn't mean forgetting." He reached out, taking her hand gently. "I loved Catherine. I'll always love Catherine. She was my first love, the mother who gave my children life. But Clara, somewhere in these past weeks, I've come to love you too. Differently, maybe. Not the same passionate rush I felt at 20, but something steadier, something that feels like coming home." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. "I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give," William said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you came here as hired help, not as a potential wife. But I wanted you to know how I feel. Wanted you to know that when I look at you, I don't see someone I purchased for $1. I see the woman who saved my daughter's life, the woman my children love, the woman who brought light back into this house." He paused. "I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with if she'll have me." Clara found her voice finally. "William, I love you too. I didn't mean to. I wasn't supposed to. But I do. I love you, and I love those children, and I love this life we've built together." The smile that broke across William's face transformed it from stern to almost boyish. "Then marry me, Clara. Not because the law requires it. Not because you need protection. Marry me because I'm asking you to. Because I want you as my partner in everything. Because I choose you every single day, and I want the world to know it." "Yes," Clara breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." The kiss that followed was gentle and certain and full of promise. When they broke apart, William rested his forehead against hers. "I was so afraid you'd say no," he admitted. "Afraid you'd think I was just trying to make your position more secure, or give the children legitimacy, or—" "William," Clara interrupted, "I said yes because I love you, not because of duty or security or the children. Those are all wonderful bonuses, but the reason is simple. You saw value in me when no one else did. You gave me a home when I had none. You let me become a mother when everyone said I couldn't. How could I not love you?" They stood together in the cold night air, holding each other, making quiet plans for a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. "When?" Clara asked. "When should we marry?" "Soon," William said. "Tomorrow if you want. I don't want to wait any longer than necessary." Clara laughed. "Tomorrow might be a bit rushed, but soon. Yes, soon." They went inside. Finally, the house warm and quiet around them. At the top of the stairs, William paused outside Clara's door. "Good night," he said, his voice soft. "Sleep well." "Good night, William." But before she could open her door, he pulled her close one more time, kissed her with a gentleness that made her knees weak. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for choosing us." "Thank you for choosing me first," Clara whispered back. She went to bed that night with her heart full to bursting, pulling out her mother's locket one last time. She looked at the young, hopeful face inside. "I found it, Mama," she whispered. I found everything I never knew I needed." Outside, stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Inside, a house full of love settled into peaceful sleep. And in the small room at the top of the stairs, Clara, soon to be Clara Hart, in truth as well as name, closed her eyes and dreamed of tomorrow. Of a wedding and a future and a love that had grown in impossible soil and bloomed anyway. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and for the first time in her life, Clara couldn't wait to see what it would bring. Morning came with Clara's heart racing before she'd even opened her eyes. Today. They were getting married today. William had ridden to town yesterday to arrange everything with Reverend Morrison, returning with the news that the Reverend could perform the ceremony that very afternoon. No need to wait. No need for elaborate preparations. Just two people choosing each other in front of God and witnesses. Clara rose and dressed it in her best dress, the blue one that had belonged to Catherine. She'd altered it carefully over the past weeks, and now it fit her perfectly. It felt right somehow wearing Catherine's dress, like a passing of blessing from one woman to another. Grace burst into her room without knocking her face alight with excitement. "Mama! You're getting married to Pa. That means you'll really truly be our mama forever, and nobody can ever say you're not. That's exactly what it means, baby girl." Clara knelt down to Grace's level. "How do you feel about that?" "Happy." Grace threw her arms around Clara's neck. "So happy I could burst. Can I wear my Sunday dress? And can I pick flowers even though it's winter?" Nathan said, "There's no flowers in winter, but I think if we look hard enough we can find some." "We'll find something beautiful, I promise," Clara said, hugging her tight. "Now go get dressed. We have a wedding to prepare for." The morning passed in controlled chaos. Benjamin took charge of his brothers, making sure everyone was clean and properly dressed. Samuel actually combed his hair without complaint. Lucas appeared with an armful of evergreen branches and pine cones he'd collected, announcing quietly that these would make fine decorations. Nathan and Grace searched the house for anything that might serve as wedding finery, emerging triumphant with ribbons and Catherine's good tablecloth. William stayed out of the house, giving Clara space to prepare, but she caught glimpses of him through the window, pacing by the barn, checking his pocket watch, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she'd come to recognize as nervousness. He was as anxious as she was. Somehow, that made her feel better. By noon, Thomas arrived with Reverend Morrison. Her brother's face split into a wide grin when he saw her. "You look beautiful, Clara. Really beautiful." "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging him. "It means everything to have you here. Wouldn't miss it. Pa doesn't know I'm here, by the way. He'd probably try to stop me, but I'm old enough to make my own choices about who I support." The words warmed her more than she could express. They gathered in front of the house as the winter sun slanted through bare trees. The children stood in a row, scrubbed and shining. Thomas positioned himself beside Clara as witness. Doc Morrison had ridden out to serve as William's witness, citing a professional interest in seeing two people he respected find happiness. And William stood waiting in his Sunday best, his gray eyes fixed on Clara with an intensity that made her breath catch. Reverend Morrison cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Clara barely heard the opening words. Her attention was fixed on William on the way. His hand trembled slightly when he reached for hers, on the emotion playing across his weathered face. "William Hart," the Reverend intoned, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." William's voice was steady, certain. His eyes never left Clara's face. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Clara whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Then by the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. William, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was witnessed by 5 cheering children, 1 beaming brother, 1 satisfied doctor, and 1 pleased reverend. It felt like sealing a promise that had been made weeks ago, but was only now being formalized. When they broke apart, William rested his forehead against hers. "Hello, Mrs. Hart." "Hello, Mr. Hart," Clara replied, laughing through her tears. The children swarmed them immediately, demanding hugs and attention and reassurance that this meant Clara was theirs forever. Now that the mean lady from town couldn't take her away, that nothing could separate their family. Nothing, William assured them, pulling all 5 children into an embrace that somehow included Clara too. "We're a family now, legal and binding and forever." They celebrated with a feast Clara had prepared that morning: roast chicken, fresh bread, winter vegetables from the cold cellar, and a cake that Grace had helped decorate with pine cones and ribbon. It wasn't elaborate, but it was made with love, and that mattered more than fancy. Thomas stayed for dinner, regaling the children with stories about Clara's childhood that made her blush and the boys laugh. It was good to hear her brother's voice, to see him fitting into this new family she'd built. As the sun set, Thomas prepared to leave. Clara walked him to his horse. "I'm happy for you," he said, swinging into the saddle. "Really happy, Clara. You deserve this. After everything Pa and Ma put you through, after what this town did to you, you deserve to be loved like this." "Come visit again," Clara said. "You're always welcome here." "I will. And Clara." He looked down at her with eyes that reminded her painfully of their mother. "Ma's not doing well. I think she regrets what happened. What she allowed to happen. She won't say it, but I see it in her face." Clara's throat tightened. Tell her I'm happy. That I've found where I belong. Maybe that will give her some peace." Thomas nodded and rode off into the gathering darkness. That night, for the first time, Clara didn't sleep alone in the small room at the top of the stairs. She shared William's room, the room that had belonged to him and Catherine, and found that there was no ghost there to haunt them. Only 2 people choosing each other, building something new on the foundation of what had been. "Are you sure about this?" William asked as they lay together in the darkness. "Sharing this room, this bed. There's no rush, Clara. We can take our time." "I'm sure," Clara said, nestling closer to his warmth. "We've both lost enough time already. I don't want to waste any more." The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Clara was no longer just the children's caretaker, but William's wife in truth. They worked together, managing the household, making decisions about the ranch, planning for the future. The children adjusted quickly, delighted to call Clara Mama, without any qualification to introduce her to anyone who'd listen as their real, actual mother. Winter began its slow retreat. The snow melted gradually, revealing frozen ground that would soon thaw. And Clara began planning for the garden. She found Catherine's old garden journal in the attic one afternoon while looking for spring clothes for the children. The journal was filled with careful notes about what had grown well, what had struggled, what the soil needed. Clara read it cover to cover, learning about the woman who'd come before her. "She loved this garden," William said, finding Clara sitting in the attic with the journal open on her lap. "Spent hours out there. Said growing things was an act of faith." "What do you mean?" "She said you put seeds in the ground not knowing if they'll sprout. You water them not knowing if they'll thrive. You tend them through drought and cold and every kind of hardship because you believe that life wants to persist. That given even the smallest chance, things that should die will choose to live instead." Clara looked at the journal in her hands. "That's beautiful. And wise." That was Catherine. William sat beside her. "She'd like you, you know. Would have called you sister. Would have been grateful beyond words that her children found you when they needed someone most." "I hope so," Clara said softly. "I'm not trying to replace her, William. I just want to honor what she built here. You already do, every day." Spring came slowly then, all at once. The frozen ground thawed. Pale green shoots began pushing through the mud, and Clara started work on the garden in earnest, following Catherine's notes, but adding her own touches. The children helped even Samuel, who'd once declared gardening boring. They planted seeds to gather vegetables and herbs, and a few flowers that Lucas had specifically requested. Grace insisted on planting carrots because they were orange, and orange was her favorite color. "Most of it probably won't grow," Benjamin said, pragmatically surveying their work. The drought's been bad. Doc Morrison said most folks gave up on gardens last year. Then we'll water extra, Clara said. And we'll hope. Sometimes hope is all you need. But hope wasn't all they needed. The drought that had settled over the territory was worse than anyone had anticipated. By late spring, the well was running dangerously low. Clara hauled water until her arms ached, rationing every drop. Most of what she planted withered. The lettuce bolted immediately. The squash vines produced leaves but no fruit. The carrots came up twisted and small. But in one corner of the garden, against all odds, a single tomato plant took root and thrived. Clara discovered the first tomato on a morning when everything else seemed to be going wrong. She'd burned breakfast, Grace had torn her only good dress, and Samuel and Nathan were fighting over something trivial. She'd escaped to the garden, seeking a moment of peace, and found instead a miracle, one perfect red tomato, impossibly bright against dusty green leaves. She knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she touched the smooth skin. Tears slid down her cheeks before she'd even realized she was crying. "You made it," she whispered to the garden to herself. "Despite everything, you made it. Clara." She looked up to find William standing at the garden's edge, his hat in his hands. "I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping at her tears. "Just being silly over a tomato." "That's not silly," William said, moving closer. "That's the first thing that's grown successfully since Catherine died. She'd be proud of you for bringing the garden back. It's just one tomato. Everything else is barely surviving." "But this one is thriving," William countered, kneeling beside her. "And you taught it how. You didn't give up even when the drought made everything harder, even when it would have been easier to let the whole garden go." He reached out, taking her dirt-covered hand in his. "You know what Catherine used to say about this garden." Clara shook her head. "She said it was a mirror of our family. Some things grow easy, some things struggle, but everything's worth tending. Every plant deserves a chance to show what it can become, given enough love and patience." Tears flowed freely down Clara's face now. "I miss her sometimes, you know, even though I never met her. I miss the woman who created all this, who loved you and the children so completely. She'd understand," William said gently. "She'd know that there's room in this family for both of you. Room in my heart for both kinds of love." That evening, they harvested the tomato together. Just one single perfect fruit, but it felt like victory. Clara sliced it carefully, sharing it among 7 people with reverence usually reserved for communion. "This is the best tomato I've ever tasted," Nathan declared around his mouthful. "That's because Mama grew it," Grace said proudly. "She made it grow when everything else was dying. She taught us something important." Benjamin added his 12-year-old wisdom, making him sound far older, about how sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that seem impossible at first, like making a garden grow in a drought, or making a family heal after losing someone, or finding love when you thought you'd lost the ability to feel it. William reached across the table and took Clara's hand, squeezing gently. Summer deepened. The garden continued its uneven growth, some things thriving, others struggling, but all of it tended with love. The children grew too, Benjamin shooting up nearly 2 inches, Grace losing her baby roundness and becoming a genuine little girl, Lucas speaking more each day with growing confidence. And Clara. Clara bloomed in ways that had nothing to do with gardening. She'd arrived at the Hart Ranch 8 months ago, broken and certain of her worthlessness. Now she moved through the house with confidence, made decisions without second-guessing herself, loved without fear of it being taken away. One evening in late summer, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Grace climbed into Clara's lap. "Mama, tell me the story again, about how you and Pa got married." "Which part do you want to hear, sweetheart?" "All of it. From the very beginning. From when Pa bought you for $1. Clara and William's eyes met over Grace's blonde head. He nodded slightly. "Well." Clara began, her voice soft in the gathering dusk. "It started on the coldest day of winter, when I stood on a platform in the snow and believed my life was over." "But it wasn't over," Nathan interrupted, settling at her feet. "It was just beginning." "That's right. It was just beginning, though I didn't know it then. All I knew was that I was being sold because the world had decided I was worthless. But Pa knew different, Samuel said, positioning himself on the porch rail. Even his voice had lost its anger, now replaced by something softer. Your father saw something in me that no one else did, Clara agreed. He saw someone who could love you children. Someone who could keep a home. Someone who could show up every day and do the work that matters. And you did, Benjamin added quietly. You showed up every single day. Because I chose you, Clara said, looking around at all 5 children at William sitting beside her with contentment written across his weathered face. I chose this family. And when you choose someone, when you really choose them, you fight for them. You don't give up when things get hard. You just keep showing up. Like the tomato, Lucas observed in his careful way. It kept growing, even when everything else gave up. Exactly like the tomato, Clara said, hugging Grace closer. They sat together as darkness fell, completely stars emerging overhead in sweeps of silver light. The children eventually drifted off to bed, one by one, until only Clara and William remained on the porch. Do you ever regret it? William asked quietly. That day in the snow, the dollar bid, all of it. Not for a single moment, Clara said with absolute certainty. Best dollar you ever spent. William laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Best dollar anyone ever spent. You took my broken family and loved us back to wholeness. We loved each other back to wholeness, Clara corrected. That's how healing works. Nobody does it alone. Years passed. The children grew into capable adults. Benjamin taking over more of the ranch operations, Samuel studying law with that fierce sense of justice that had once been only anger. Lucas becoming a teacher who helped other quiet children find their voices. The twins went their own directions, but always stayed close, always came home for holidays and harvests. And through it all, the garden grew. Some years were abundant, others sparse. But there was always something that thrived, always something that proved that given enough love and patience, life persists. Clara and William grew old together, their hands weathered by work and time, but always reaching for each other. They sat on that back porch countless evenings, sharing coffee and comfortable silence, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. When travelers passed the Hart Ranch in later years, they'd slow their wagons to read the hand-carved sign by the fence, not for sale. The locals knew the story how William Hart had bought his wife for $1 in a public auction, how she'd arrived broken and left whole, how she'd taken a dying garden and a grief-stricken family and loved them back to life through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Some said the sign referred to the ranch itself, a declaration that no amount of money could convince them to abandon the land. Others claimed it was about the garden, about Clara's fierce protection of the space she'd brought back from death. A few romantic souls insisted it was about love itself, a reminder that the best things once freely chosen could never be bought or sold. They were all right. On summer evenings, long after the children had grown and started families of their own, Clara and William could still be found on that porch, gray-haired and weathered, but content in ways that had nothing to do with ease, and everything to do with choosing each other every day for decades. What are you thinking about? William would ask, seeing that distant look in her eyes. Just grateful, Clara would reply. Grateful for the man who saw value where others saw only deficiency. Grateful for the children who taught me that family is a choice. Grateful for one perfect tomato that reminded me broken things can still grow. It does come. William would finish squeezing her hand. Yes. Clara would agree, watching the sun set over land they'd built a life on together. Eventually it comes. And in the garden where Catherine's hands had first broken ground and Clara's had coaxed it back to life. Tomatoes grew wild and bright, bearing fruit long past the season, when such things should have withered. Because that's what love did. It made impossible things possible. It nurtured life in the harshest conditions. It transformed $1 into riches beyond measure. The sign by the fence stood for generations, its meaning clear to anyone who cared to understand some things, once freely chosen and faithfully tended, become so valuable that no price could ever purchase them. Not land, not gardens, not family, and certainly not love. Clara Whitmore had stood on an auction block in the snow, sold for the price of a single coin, believing her story was ending. But she'd been wrong. It was only beginning. And the life she built from that dollar, the love she gave and received, the children she raised, the garden she nurtured, the man she chose, and who chose her back, proved something the whole territory eventually came to understand. A woman's worth has nothing to do with her womb, and everything to do with her heart. And a heart brave enough to keep loving, keep choosing, keep showing up, despite every reason to give up that heart, is priceless. That's the story of how Clara Hart, once sold for $1 in a winter storm, became the richest woman in the whole territory. Not in silver or gold, but in the things that actually matter. Love freely given, family freely chosen, and the unshakable knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged.